Hey friends, today we are doing October's wrap up. This month was such a good reading month for me, which is kind of funny because I totally bombed the 1 week where I had a readathon and I barely read anything, but I managed to read 6 other books around the readathon. Like, I'm not really sure how that ended up working out, but I'm gonna get right into the books. The first book that I finished this month was Us Against You by Frederick Bachman, which is the second book in the Beartown soon-to-be trilogy. The third book probably won't be out for a couple years still, but this is the second book. It was so heart-wrenching, so heartbreaking, such a beautiful book with beautiful, flawed characters. I absolutely loved first page to last page. I cried so much during this book, especially at a certain point. It just is gut-wrenching, and I absolutely loved this one. I gave this 5 stars, hands down, no contest. It was so good. So the next book that I finished this month was All the Missing Girls by Megan Miranda. This book follows, and I'm having like a brain fart because it feels like it's been so long since I read these first couple books. So in this book, we have like your typical small town girl. Something bad happens. Her best friend goes missing. She moves to the big city, and like a decade later, she gets called back to town and someone else goes missing. And so they're trying to figure out what's happening. It was kind of an interesting concept because you start out at the beginning. I don't know how to explain it. It's like weird. So you lead up to the point where she gets back to town, and then after she gets to town, it jumps ahead 2 weeks and goes backwards. So it was an interesting concept, but it did make it kind of confusing to keep things in line, and you had to keep remembering that as you went through, the characters you're watching don't know the things that you know yet, and you have to like remember it in reverse, which was a little bit distracting, but I found that the ending was really underwhelming. I didn't like where the characters ended up, and I didn't like how they kind of made it seem like it was okay with what happened. I don't want to spoil anything, but I was not too keen on this. I think I ended up giving it 2.5, and I think I rounded this one to 3. It was a quick read. It kept my attention, but it was very like underwhelming in the end. Next, we have An Anonymous Girl by Greer Hendricks and Sarah Pekkanen. A bunch of people have said The Wife Between Us is a lot better, but after reading this, I'm like not even interested. And also, I feel like if it's the same kind of storyline, like I don't know how to say this without spoiling anything. I just want to say it. If you want to know what I'm talking about or being elusive about, comment down below and I'll answer the thing that I don't like, because it kind of happened in both of these, but this one it was way more centered around like it was the basic plot. I don't know. I haven't read the inside thing, so maybe it's already in there and I should have known that going into it. But anyway, this revolved around something that I really didn't like, and I didn't understand, like I just didn't really enjoy this one. It was a really quick read. I kind of liked the main character. I didn't think she was so bad. I didn't like how it ended. Like she does something at the end that like seemed really off color to me, and I was like, well, now you kind of ruined her for me. But essentially it's this girl who joins this like psych evaluation kind of a thing, like an anonymous questionnaire, and then she ends up getting roped into this job, and I thought it was gonna be like darker and she was gonna have to like question her morals a lot more, and I thought it was gonna be like a lot more interesting, and it ended up being like a really, really boring thing. And nothing in this book surprised me. There was no twists, no turns, nothing was shocking, nothing like happened. Like, I don't know, I was really bored by the time I got to the end because I felt like I just read this whole thing and nothing really happened and there was nothing surprising, and what's the point of reading something that doesn't surprise you when it's this genre? Anyway, I did not really enjoy this one. I think I ended up giving it a 2. It wasn't very good. I didn't like it. Frankenstein by Mary Shelley, and actually I feel like maybe I read this after Us Against You. Not that that matters. I still read it this month. I gave Frankenstein 3.5 stars. It wasn't my favorite. I feel like upon a reread, I might actually raise the rating. I'm not really sure. The more I think about it, the more I like it. But the ending dragged for me. Like the last bit, it did kind of draw out. It felt a little bit overwritten and overdone. And I think that's what pulled it down for me, because by the end, I was just getting a little bit bored, and it's not that long. But it probably, because it says part 1, part 2, part 3, or however it is, I'm assuming it was probably released in 3 separate parts back when it first came out. So if you were to wait a little bit of time between each set of chapters, then maybe it wouldn't have felt so drawn out at the end, but I read it all really fast and it felt like the end really dragged for me. I thought this was a really interesting book. It was really good at questioning morals and ethics and things like that. It's got a lot of conversation points, and I've actually had a few really good conversations about it with people on like Instagram and YouTube and stuff. And so it's definitely like a great book club book or like just conversation book, because it's really interesting. Like, what would you do if you were in Frankenstein's position? And a lot of people make Frankenstein out to be like they always say he's the actual monster, but I don't know, I kind of have maybe a soft spot for him. Like, I feel like the big question in this book for me would be, just because you can do something, should you? Like, just because it could be possible, should you actually do that thing? Or just because you could get away with it, like, should you do that thing? And I feel like he kind of played with that and he went for it, and then this whole book is kind of just a memoir of regret. And so it was hard to call him a monster because he literally spent the rest of his life regretting his decisions without giving away too much. But I thought it was really, really beautifully written. I loved the writing. I thought it was really great. I just thought it was drawn out a bit at the end. I likely will read this again, which is kind of funny that I only gave it a 3, but I think next fall I might give it another shot and maybe I'll raise the rating a bit on Goodreads. But I thought Frankenstein was a good little story, definitely caught my attention, really interesting, and I read it pretty fast, especially because it's a classic. Usually they take me a little bit longer, but maybe I'm just getting better at absorbing it, so they're going by faster. Next, I read Agatha Christie's And Then There Were None. There are so many people reading this book this month. Mackenzie Lane has a book club on Goodreads, and every month they pick a book, and this was the book this month, which is really fun because I actually got to participate this time. It's the Story Atlas book club. If I forget, tell me and I will link it down below, because a lot of times I'll forget to link the things. So this is like a whodunit classic mystery novel. I don't read a lot of mystery because you guys know it's very hit and miss. I want to try more of Agatha Christie though, because they're quick read. This was a really quick read, but I thought it was just a fun little story. Read it in a couple of days. 10 people end up going to an island and they start dying, and you have to try and figure out as you're going through who is doing all of this killing, what is happening, what's going on. I thought it was really interesting. I thought the characters were really flawed, but also like most of them had a likable quality to them, which was kind of a neat way to write it. I really had fun with this. I was really excited because when I found, you don't really find out until the epilogue what happens, but when I got to that part, I was like excited that I guessed the right person, but technically, I mean, I didn't, because it definitely threw me off with what goes on in the book. But I really liked this one. I think I gave it 4 stars. Wasn't my favorite book of all time, but definitely really fun, and I definitely want to try more of Agatha Christie's books. And then last but not least, my baby, my favorite baby book in the whole world, Bridge of Clay. You guys have probably heard me talk about this a million times, and I've been talking about it all year, saying I want to do a reread, I want to do a reread. Finally, I'm doing a reread. I have 70 pages left. It is Halloween today, and I plan on finishing those 70 pages today because I want to technically finish 6 books in a month. But reading this book for the second time around, even more heartbreaking, even more heart-wrenching. I have cried so much in the last 2 days. I have just been bawling like a baby. Even more tabs have been added than ever were in here before. I love these characters so, so, so much. In case you don't know what Bridge of Clay is about, it is the story of 5 Dunbar I can never say this. It's the story of 5 Dunbar boys. They are brothers. Their mother passes away and their father leaves. And the first time you read it, you have no idea why their father left. You don't know what happened. And by the time you get to the end, you find out why he went away and why there's so much animosity between the family members. And you learn so much about all the characters. So this story, it's about these 5 brothers, but it focuses mainly on the 4th brother, whose name is Clay. And Clay is such a beautiful character. I love how the characters in this story are written. To me, it almost feels like poetry. It's such beautiful writing. The imagery is really interesting. The way that he explains things, it's just so cool. I don't know if I mentioned this. It's by Marcus Zuzak, the same guy who wrote The Book Thief, but this book is not The Book Thief. Just don't even compare the two. Apples and oranges, like birds and hyenas. Like, they're so different. So different. But in this story, you have Matthew is your narrator, and he's telling Clay's story. And Clay is telling his mother's story, who's Penny, and his father's story, Michael. And it is so amazing, so beautiful, so heart-wrenching. And by the time you get to the end, I'm sobbing, just sobbing. I had to take a break from reading because I was so sad. Like, I kid you not, last night I couldn't fall asleep because I couldn't stop thinking about the characters in this book, and they're not even real. They're not real, but they feel so real. This book, it kind of jumps forward and backward in time, and you get little bits and snippets of stories from here and there, but they're not chronological. So it's kind of like a patchwork quilt, and each time you get a new square, and sometimes other squares make other ones more important, and it's just, you get so many of these aha moments, and it's like breadcrumbs just sprinkled throughout the story, and things come back up, and they're so sentimental, and you feel like you lived it with them, and I could rave about this book all day long. Till the end of time, I adored this book. I love all the imagery on the cover. Every single thing in here has significance. It's just such a beautiful book. Anyway, that's everything that I read this month. This has probably been the best reading month I've had all year. So excited to have read so much this month. The mystery thrillers really bumped up the numbers because they're so fast to get through and just so easy to read. Anyway, that's everything that I read this month. Let me know down below what you read this month. Let me know what your favorite book was, what your least favorite book was. Have you read any of these? Are any of these on your radar? Anything you want, just leave me a comment down below. And while you're down there, don't forget to hit subscribe if you haven't already, and the bell so you don't miss future notifications. I do upload most Mondays and Thursdays, and I will talk to you guys all in my next video. Thanks so much. Bye.